One of the big conversations this week is about, it's not just this week, it has been the constant conversation with our politicians. There's also our police service. And police brutality is an issue that keeps rearing its ugly head. Whenever you think that you've dealt with it, it comes back. The day before yesterday, there was an issue at the County Assembly of Nairobi where MCAs wanted to have a word with their speaker, Patricia, because they'd like to...
A word or two.
A word or two. Can I have a word? And the speaker did not want to have the word with them.
Didn't want to hear the word.
Didn't want to hear the word, so to speak. So it happens that police were brought into this. It also happens that police came in and they said, no word shall be heard here. While we stand here, we want everybody to leave this premise. And you know what police usually do? They tell you to leave and they expect you to have left by the time they said leave. So people were leaving and there was, the whole hullabaloo. But we saw images on social media, on mainstream media, photos and videos of this particular incident where one lady was cornered by a group of male police officers, some carrying batons, others carrying guns, some carrying batons and guns.
Please describe them appropriately. Hefty, well-fed, vicious-looking
men.
Yes.
Human beings of the male species.
Yes, who then proceeded to demonstrate the level of violence that they are able to mete out on one single helpless lady.
Went to her, they cornered her, they want her to leave, but of course they have surrounded her, so she has no exit.
No, none.
And then they proceeded to rain blows on her.
And she was, remember, pushed, if we were to go by what we said, she was pushed to the ground.
How
was she supposed to leave? Through the floor?
Blows were rained on her using those batons. It was serious. It was bad. What did we hear that same day? We heard from the Director of Public Prosecutions, who said that he had reached out to the Inspector General of Police and to the chairperson of the Independent Policing Oversight Authority, to commence investigations onto this. What did we hear from the Inspector General of Police? Zero. So far, what have we heard from the Inspector General of Police?
Zero.
What action has been taken on these police officers? We don't know.
Well, there's some report that the minister, the CS in charge of this, has intervened. There's a report. But then there's the issue of confirmation that isn't very clear.
Yeah.
Yes.
What exactly should happen? So yesterday, the CS for Interior, Fred Matiang'i, was speaking and he broached this topic, and this is what he said.
Are we going to get a contingent of GSU and ask Mr. Kanja to station a contingent of GSU outside the county assembly? Because they're constantly fighting, it's war and so on and so forth. And I've asked the Inspector General of Police today, with the regional security team in Nairobi, to disarm everyone around that county assembly. Anyone who holds firearms, there could be people. We already collected 14 guns. Let's tell the public the truth. The 14 guns we collected from around that environment, the level of criminality that has gone on, I suspect there could probably be more firearms.
You hear that? Basically, what the CS is saying is that we have hooligans, armed people at the County Assembly of Nairobi.
Okay.
Not police officers, eh?
Okay.
Are we going to be having to call police every time we have an issue at the County Assembly of Nairobi?
He has introduced a new topic. Completely new. Police brutality. Did he address what was in the media? Did he address what was in the social media?
He is bringing the other angle, probably. He's saying, look, we have got to tell the public the truth. That you're seeing one side. This is the danger of a single story. Single story is what you're seeing there. What had happened
there's a guess that this lady was armed.
What happened before this? What made the armed police officers to be called into this specific area is what you're not being told by the media.
Actually, it isn't the first time.
Are we going to get a contingent of GSU
and not in Nairobi
and ask
County?
Mr. Kanja?
Other counties have had similar issues. And see, the issue seems to have always been around the speaker. We had the same issue in Kisumu. We've had it elsewhere. Police were called in. So this isn't new. But in all these cases, what we witnessed the other day has not been witnessed. What I actually kept wondering was, those huge pieces of wood, are they standard issue for police?
To deal with such situations?
Yes, it is standard issue. That
Probably.
So you ask, where are we going? County hall. Okay, standard issue. Everybody come and take your piece of wood, which is appropriate for that situation. Look, even if he's providing an alternative perspective, he should address the issue that is bringing about the discussion of the alternative. It must be addressed. He is the CS. He must say it categorically.
There are big issues and there's a bigger issue.
Yes.
There's a bigger issue on somebody who's been trained to quell such kind of situations and how they conduct themselves, how they handle themselves when they are confronted with such situations. Let's go to the phone lines anyway and look at it from the angle of the human rights. And we have the Executive Director of Amnesty International Kenya on the line, Irongo Houghton. Good morning, Irongo.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Irongo.
Also joining us on the line.
I'm glad to be on the show again on the same subject. Huh? It's not been 3 months, I think.
Imagine.
Yes, different example, same subject.
Same subject. Also joining us on the line is the person who brings this subject today to the fore, and this is the member of the County Assembly for Mlango Kubwa ward in Nairobi, Patricia Mutheu. Good morning, Patricia.
Good morning.
Patricia, you're speaking to us from your hospital bed?
Yeah, but I'm getting discharged today.
It's good to hear that. It's good to hear that. So basically this means that the doctors have certified that you have tremendously improved and now you can leave the hospital and go home.
Yeah.
This issue that we saw police officers who had cornered you. We also saw you addressing the media at some point later and saying, what had happened, how you were cornered, how you were beaten up by the police officers. They caused some serious bodily harm. Can you just describe for us what you've gone through in the last, let's say, 48 hours?
Apart from physical harm, what actually I'm struggling with right now is psychological, issues, because I'm trying to put together as to why they had to impound on me, because I was seated all alone and actually I was minding my own business. There was no room for dialogue. Immediately they got into the assembly lounge. The 4 of them just surrounded me and they were telling me to leave. And I was actually trying to tell them I cannot run towards the tear gas because I have a problem with sinuses. And he wouldn't listen. He immediately, actually, it's one of the senior officer who started it, because he took the baton from one of his junior and hit me first. And then I was like, what have I done wrong? Immediately before I even knew what was going on, he held me by the neck and pulled me down. And that's where he started kicking me. So rungus were coming from all over. Some were slapping me, kicking my head. Some were kicking my stomach. And I was just there, wondering what is going on. At some point I felt like I was going to pass out. Yeah, so when they realized there were media around, that's when they stopped. So when I stood up and ran towards one side, they followed me with a tear gas. So it was kind of a confusing environment and, terrified.
I can imagine. It's traumatizing. Sometimes we look at these things from a distance and we forget the psychological trauma that somebody goes through at that point. You do not know when it stops. You don't know what kind of harm they're inflicting on you. You can just feel the pain, the confusion, and you don't exactly understand what's happening. It must have been a very horrible experience for you, and we really apologize.
It was. I wouldn't wish it to happen to anyone, because it's I don't think it's fair being beaten like a thief. And I have 4 men kicking me from down, and all these rungus. I even tried to, there's one rungu that I tried to block my head, and I have a serious cut, on my hand. And I'm just trying to understand why they had to do that. I honestly can't get answers.
So, just so that we can also see if we can address what the CS Matiang'i is raising here. Patricia, what were you doing at the lounge of the County Assembly at that time?
One, we collect our letters from the pigeon hole.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd come to one, collect my letter, and also meet my colleague called Oyugi, Honorable Oyugi. And that's why I decided not to go upstairs. Let me sit downstairs, all alone.
At this point, several of your colleagues were also agitating to have a word with the Speaker of the County Assembly.
Yeah.
Where were they? How far were they from where you were seated?
They were upstairs.
So you are downstairs, they are upstairs.
Yeah.
You're basically
Yeah.
not part of whatever is happening
Yes.
upstairs.
Yes.
And when they started throwing the tear gas,
Yeah.
had the people who were upstairs left the scene?
No, they came running.
Yeah.
So, bearing my condition,
Yeah.
I will not put myself into that trouble of, running towards the tear gas. And since I was not anywhere involved in all those, skirmishes, I decided to sit. I wasn't doing anything wrong.
And then, since then, have you had any contact from the police
No,
or from the Ministry of Interior?
no,
No statement taken.
no.
Irongo, let's bring you in here. I mean, obviously you've spoken to Patricia before this, and you know the story and the background of what you're hearing. How would you? I mean, what is it that you would say about this particular incident, Irongo?
So I think, first of all, just on behalf of the movement and members of Amnesty International Kenya, just to offer our sincere empathy with Honorable Mutheu and Musimi. We watched the incident with disbelief and horror. And we extend our empathy because from what we could see that she experienced all of this in the course of duty. And I think there are kind of four issues that we need to deliberate on as a country, but even on this show this morning. And first is really that violence against women parliamentarians is a global problem, and it is sadly very alive here in Kenya. I mean, it is said that 26% of women parliamentarians have experienced violence not outside of parliament, but inside parliament. Like on Mutheu, 46 or half of them fear for their security. And we've seen cases in Brazil and in the UK with Mariela Franco and Joe Cox where they have actually been killed while working in the service duty. And the second and third area really is around, that the police brutality in this particular case was actually quite different because the officers involved were very senior and they are known, and I think there needs to be a focus on really what does it mean when you have very senior officers in Vigilance House involved personally in the violence. And the third one, really, I think we've talked a bit about the issue of political tensions within the county assembly. And there needs to be some strategy around how do we de-escalate the violence that is now spiraling in the Nairobi County Assembly, but also in other county assemblies in the country.
Yeah. It also raises the very many issues here of when you talk about the first two issues or so that you've addressed, the system itself, the police service, the government, and the attitude that it has towards enforcing laws or even de-escalating tensions, as you call it, with citizens, with unarmed citizens. Is this an attitude problem? Is this a training problem? Is this what is it that could lead police officers, for example, in this particular incident, to act the way they did?
I mean, I think the first thing to say is that there is no single story. That these issues are complex, and at the same time they're very simple. The complexity comes from different things that are happening at the same time. So first of all, if there is no human rights-based approach to public order management or to the management of public spaces, then you're going to see this level of violence. I mean, just on a light touch, but I think it is a very sad touch that those batons that were being used are almost the size of electricity poles. Like, how would you bring electricity poles to police a county assembly? We know from the County Assembly's Powers and Privileges Act that the police should not even be inside the county assembly. They should really be monitoring from outside the precincts. But what we saw there was really a violation of that particular law. We also saw, the level of violence that was perpetrated is really, it's at the level of an assault. And I think the 4 officers, should really be brought before a court of law and charged with assault. And that's all that Kenyans should expect at this time. There is an obligation under the law that the Inspector General has to meet, and that is essentially that under our Constitution and under his, the National Police Service Act that he operates under, what happens next is extremely clear. First of all, that officers are not allowed to assault civilians. They're not allowed to torture them. They're not allowed to carry out corporal punishment. They must use non-violent means, first and foremost, and if they have to use force, it must be proportional. Every single person who saw that viral video could see that Honorable Mutheu did not pose a security threat in that moment. She could have been escorted off the property, and if she had committed a crime, she could have been arrested and charged with that crime. The level of violence was simply unacceptable.
What is interesting and alarming is that these appear, from the garments they were wearing, to be senior officers. So, if these are senior officers behaving this way, I mean, this question has to be asked again, Irungu. Would you argue that the police actually know what they're supposed to do, or is it that what we're seeing is what they know they should do?
I think, first of all, I think it's important not to blanket condemn the entire police force, 150,000 officers, but I think we have a real institutionalized problem and a behavioral problem with the police service. One of the officers, and it is now in the public domain, was James Moniki Adabi. He is a commissioner of police in charge of operations at Vigilance House. The operation was overseen by the OCS at Central Police, Simon Kirich. These are the 2 officers that are extremely senior within the police service, and for them to have presided over this this horror that we saw was just shocking. And it's a bit ironic because at the same time that was happening, roughly the same time that was happening, the Inspector General was actually releasing new e-learning guidelines on how to improve the service of our police. And I think my attention was drawn to one of the modules, and that module was a human rights approach to public order management. Now, as Amnesty, we completely support that direction. But I think we have to say that, there's no point having classes on these topics if they are not borne out in reality. If people cannot experience the benefit of these classes, then, to be honest, it is a waste of public money.
Irungu, let me justify why I am actually mentioning the police force wholesale. Do we have any records in any annals whatsoever where we've seen situations where violence is being meted by some police officers and others attempting to prevent them from actually doing this? Have we ever seen this?
We have seen cases. We saw the declaration of a GSU officer about a year ago for essentially refusing to be charged into a shooting of 2 suspects in Parklands. I think you remember that case.
I do remember it, yes.
You have to realize also that for every police officer that is interdicted and arrested, in many cases it is officers that arrest them, and it is also officers that provide evidence that go into cases that lead to their interdiction or dismissal, or even that their conviction. So I think that the thing is not to get caught in a single narrative about the police. It is to actually begin to identify those officers and that culture that is no longer acceptable under our Constitution. And we should note also that this coming month, in a couple of days, we're actually going into the 10th anniversary of our Constitution and our Bill of Rights. And it would be shocking that we go past this 10-year mark and we are still talking about police brutality. We are still talking about violence against citizens. Furthermore,
but why would you call it shocking?
Well, I think we have to not. I don't think we can normalize this. I think this is the first danger that the public has. Once this becomes normalized and acceptable, we give license to anybody in uniform, particularly those in new blue uniforms, to perpetuate violence that we saw in the colonial era, that we saw in the 1970s and 80s. And I know the Inspector General will not want to leave this legacy. So I keep saying, do not normalize this. This is not normalized. It is shocking. It is horrific. And we must condemn it.
Patricia, if I may come to you, first of all, my deepest and most profound sympathies to what happened to you. But as a leader, would you say that what happened to you is something that many Kenyans consider to be normal?
Yes, the area I represent Mlango Kubwa, which is in Mathare constituency. And one of my biggest challenges is extrajudicial killings and also police harassment and brutality. And it's been something that has been ongoing, and despite all the, independent bodies raising their voice, actually very little is done because they're not in a position to raise their voice. But now even this matter escalating into, assembly precincts where people regard those places as safe places to be, and actually unleashing such horror into someone who's unarmed. Then to Kenyans, most Kenyans, I'm looking at the comments, and to them it's just like, it's normal to say system ya majambazi.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that is a question that we really need to ask and to raise. Why does it appear too normal? And also, when you follow up, also like the comments from the people who are supposed, to give clear direction as to why this shouldn't happen, it's like somehow they're trying to justify and direct the matter in a very, smart way of, making it
appear normal. Yep.
Appear normal as to why people are attacked. And I think as Kenyans, we demand to be given the right answers for the right questions.
Yeah.
This was not about the county assembly. It was about one person being attacked and she's unarmed.
Yeah. It's about police action in the course of their duty.
Action. And let me point out that it was the senior police who started this. The rest were okay, actually. They were just trying to, just get out. But he is the one who took the baton and hit me first. He is the one who held me by my neck and dragged me down. And he started beating me. So the rest joined. That one I have to state clearly.
It's a senior police officer who basically just came and
set the example.
Yes.
Set the example for the juniors on what the juniors were supposed to do.
As a leader of Mlango Kubwa, if I'm the first person to throw stones to the police,
your constituents will do the same. They'll
so
follow
it's
your
up
example.
To me to act, exactly, it's up to me to act responsibly. So if this system that from top people don't act responsibly, then it's a system of impunity that nothing will happen. I'll always have my senior protector.
Yep.
Really making Kenya, or are we really destroying our country?
I mean, this raises serious issues. Like you said, Mlango Kubwa is one of those areas where skirmishes and running battles between police and the residents has become normalized. I mean, we report it, we say, okay, the residents of Mlango Kubwa have complained, or there was a police operation and they're up in arms and they're complaining about the way the police conducted themselves. At some point, it becomes, part of the normal thing that the senior police officers will say, I mean, this is how we deal with the situation in Mlango Kubwa. When you raise the issues, I'm sure because you have addressed the issue of police brutality in Mlango Kubwa ward itself and even going to the officers in the national government, what do they respond? Just before even your incident, what kind of response have you been getting from police officers when you raise the issues of Mlango Kubwa?
I'd like to commend my station in Mlango Kubwa police station. We have a very good relationship with OCPD because first they always emphasize on dialogue, and we've held enough meetings with them. So again, I would like to say not all police forces are bad. Okay, they are the ones who are actually understand this is how it's supposed to be done, and actually we find an equilibrium where we can coexist between my people and the police. So I don't want to generalize Of course, there are ones, we have ones who are like really, really committed to their jobs and to, enforcing peace. But what I saw yesterday, I would say it's just a section of people who acted out of, I don't know, maybe I'm just trying to understand that it was wrong. But now it is even wrong when you see the senior also not like condemning the act directly, but justifying why it happened.
One of the problems, and I'm talking to you, Patricia, as well as you, Irungu, is yes, we shouldn't normalize it, but unfortunately, what has been seen in the public has been the normalization of this, so that even when you have cases of actual service to the people, they diminish in comparison to whatever else we see. Now, there are those who said it's the media who highlight it. Actually, it's our job to highlight it, but we're not highlighting falsehoods. These things are representative. So even as the Mheshimiwa tells us of the good relationship she has with the OCPD in the area that she represents, that seems to be the example you want to dismiss simply because it's an aberration. It is not what is considered the norm. Now, Irungu, one of the things that your organization does is you collect data and statistics and you understand these things. What percentage, if you look at the harm that we've seen being perpetrated by our police service, what percentage of mitigation would you say we have also seen vis-a-vis the perpetration of the harm?
So, CT, I think it's a great question. Before I address it, I think let me come back to this other point about, this is normal. It is not normal. It is only normal if we drop our moral compass, our ethical compass for what we expect as standards for the right to life in this country. Martin Luther King once spoke about the issue of being maladjusted, and he said he was proud to be maladjusted, which meant that he was never going to adjust to the inequality and injustice of his time. So I think we have to keep saying this is not normal, right? People, even if we see 5 car accidents in a week, that is not the normal way to drive a car.
Yep.
If I can just put an analogy.
Yep.
Coming back to your question, I think the key thing, I think there are a number of issues here. First of all, we know from the Director of Public Prosecutions that they have received 177 cases or complaints against police officers. 117, I think, of those cases are currently before courts.
Mm-hmm.
We know that there are thousands of complaints that the Independent Policing Oversight Authority have received, and yet we have seen no more than 15 convictions of police officers for either murder or serious crimes.
Yep.
We know from the Inspector General that he has been grappling with officers that are essentially found to be unfit to hold service, and one of those 4 officers that beat Honorable Mutheu was one of them. It's in the public domain if people would like to look up that, and that he was seen to be unfit to hold office in 2016, but he was then returned back to service by a court of law. So I think there are a number of things that we have to keep in mind, but we are definitely not seeing the zero tolerance that was announced about a month ago by the Inspector General and by the Interior Cabinet Secretary. And just to note, the clip that you ran is actually a very shortened clip of what he said yesterday afternoon. And in that afternoon, he spoke about this country not being a country of brutality. This is not a country that will accept this level of brutality. Now, I know there's a lot of skepticism about what he is going to be able to do about it, but I think it's important that political leaders continue to keep that statement in the public domain, and then what we must look for is enforcement of those statements in reality. So I think the whole nation is now watching to see what happens with these 4 officers. Will they be dismissed?
Yeah, what action will be taken?
What action will be taken? Will they be dismissed? Will they be brought to a court of law and charged with assault? This is what the nation now is waiting to see.
I think we shouldn't even be waiting for so long. I mean, this is something that should have started immediately. There's a comment here. Somebody says, police brutality unfortunately appears normal because the minister, Matiang'i, will issue tough statements, make a few shake-ups, an interdiction here, suspension there, and that's it. No deliberate systemic plans to clean up the service. A few months down the road, the same, again and again and again. And we'll play another part of what the CS Matiang'i said yesterday, having a conversation with the MCA from Mlango Kubwa ward, Patricia Mutheu, who is in hospital, but she's being discharged today. She says she's feeling much better. And also the executive director of Amnesty International Kenya, Irungu Houghton.
You know, 25 to 30% of our deployment in security in the CBD is around the county assembly of Nairobi. And everybody can see. I don't know why we are so pretentious and hypocritical. Tunadanganyana hapa, we are just lying around to each other here. That is not an institution that deliberates on anything. They are constantly fighting. It's a war zone. So when things happen, now we are dealing with a crisis here, which could actually be a reputational crisis for us as security sector people. I don't condone, and I've said this clearly, I do not condone any violent handling of members of the public or leaders. But a time has come for us to be honest, to be very sincere, and speak to each other as responsible people. Because enough is now finally enough. We cannot go on this way.
I don't condone violence by the police officers, but let's also be honest.
Yes, but what
is this that is causing this violence?
But Eric, what exactly is he saying, really? I'm trying to understand, because that statement, it's difficult to get vaguer than that.
It sounds to me that in both of those clips, what the CS is saying is that there's an issue with the county assembly.
Acceptable, right. Understood.
There's constant skirmish at the county assembly.
Yes.
That is requiring police officers to be deployed to the county assembly regularly.
Yes.
And let us not bury our heads in the sand, but address that as well.
Why doesn't he actually point out what it is that he's talking about? He's generalized it. You see, if you talk about he does not condone, I expected, I condemn in the strongest possible word, a nice generic term that people like using to distance themselves from such things, but I don't condone.
And I direct the IG of
yes. You see, when you talk about violence and the meeting out of violence in the CBD, it's an occurrence when you have skirmishes and issues at the county hall, county assembly.
Yeah.
But there are parts of this country, not this city, where they will tell you that the relationship with the police service is adversarial at best. That's the experience.
Yeah.
That's their lived experience.
Yeah.
Now, this is what I was suggesting and stating as being normal for these people. Now, this is what, in my opinion, needs to be addressed, because whatever habits are acquired in those particular regions is what we're seeing now playing out in the public domain. And the example being set by the senior officers themselves. So, where I would agree with Rungu, I would not blame the junior officers. If this is this is the example that the leader set.
The top boss.
Yes, and these are disciplined forces who are trained to actually obey orders. What is spoken. Now imagine what you need to do when it is actually done.
And Irungu and Patricia, you can come into this conversation at any moment that you wish to. What is it that happens to leaders then when they get to these positions? Because, listen, this is not new. Having covered the news and all over these years, this is something that you will hear from police officers, even in ordinary conversations. Like, you know what, this is how these people behave. So, we need to deal with them. This is how these youth behave. We need to deal with them this way. People need to understand that there is a law to be followed. People need to understand that there is law enforcement and there is order.
And then they proceed to break the very law that they're supposed to.
No, their justification is what exactly they're doing is enforcing law and order. And that
exactly.
they are right and you are wrong. What happens to people when
Eric,
they get to these positions?
I would defer to Honorable Mutheu to go first if she would like to intervene. Otherwise, I have a few thoughts.
Good. Patricia, go first.
Okay. One, it's not normal to have police inside the precincts of assembly because you have our own sergeant at arms who are supposed to quell any issue or any skirmishes that might arise inside the assembly. So one, it's not right. So definitely, we need to know who had given authorization for the police to come in the assembly. So one, it's not normal.
Irungu.
So that's also a question I want answered.
Yeah.
Two, it's not normal to attack someone who's just minding her own business. Two, it's not normal for me to get beaten like I've stolen something inside my place of work. It's not normal.
None of this is normal. What did you respond to what the CS is saying? Because the CS is saying, look,
Honestly,
we
he's
see a lot of
generalizing, he is trying to justify what happened. It happened because we can no longer discuss issues in that assembly.
Mhm.
That it happened because we cannot maintain law and order. It happened because they were trying to protect. Who are they trying to protect?
the public.
If the people were supposed to be protected, what is the assembly? How?
So I think we are losing Patricia as we try to speak to her. Yeah.
If this was not caught on camera, then that would have been a very bad misinformation to public. But thank God, it's all there. Anyone can be able to see that I was all alone,
Yep.
which is wrong. As leaders, you should learn to say the truth.
There's no logical explanation to what was happening.
Exactly. Honestly, there is no logical explanation. And that is what is tormenting me, trying to get answers.
Irongo.
I mean, I think, Honorable Mutheu, you deserve a public apology by the Cabinet Secretary for Interior. That would be a first start. The second is essentially action to be taken on the 4 officers. And thirdly, you can consider your legal right to sue those officers for an assault on your person. So I think these would be the options. I think as Amnesty International, we are committed to everybody having a dignified and a safe experience in this country. And I think in the same way that we will uphold your right to not be beaten and assaulted by police officers, I think it's important to realize that the County Assembly is a place of parliamentary deliberation. It is not a place to throw chairs. It's not a place to storm offices. It is not a place to threaten and use inflammatory language. And I think the county members of County Assembly at various times have been using this. I think this is what the Interior Secretary is speaking to.
Okay.
And Kenyans have to say that we did not elect you to be violent. One of the things that worries me most about this incident, beyond just the violence that we saw against you, Honorable Mutheu, is that this begins a trend towards violent politics leading up to the 2022 election. And we have to say that at this time we need to review security measures, not just for the County Assembly of Nairobi, but for other county assemblies where we've seen violence in the last month or so. The second possible way forward would be to involve the Senate, I think State House, and also the Council of Governors need to weigh in very quickly and help mediate a non-resolution to the problems at the Nairobi County. Because I think the issues are not just at the level of the impeachment of Beatrice Elachi.
Yep.
It is also to do with the configuration of the Nairobi Metropolitan Service and Governor Sonko. So I think these are complex matters that cannot just be left to boil over as they did as they have in the last few weeks.
I agree with you, actually. It's because what we are seeing now, even if we didn't have the violence meted out on Honorable Mutheu, we could have just treated what was happening in the County Assembly as one of those things that we're used to, drama at the County Assembly. And you've raised the issue, Irongo, of the expectation of the electorate on their leaders, the conduct of the MCAs and the leadership of the County Assembly of Nairobi, or even the executive of Nairobi, and what we keep seeing. Why would there be this kind of skirmishes in a building and in a house that is expected to be a house of political debate with decorum? So then the question now that I'd like to ask you is, as we talk about there needs to be some resolution to this conflict, You've mentioned, yes, the State House needs to come in at some point, the Council of Governors needs to come in at some point, the Senate needs to come in at some point. But what's the genesis of the problem that we're having? Is it possible for us to go back and ask ourselves, where did the rain start beating Nairobi, and address it from that point?
One of the things that I think has been utilized in many ways is I don't think there has been, sufficient, if any, investment in building a civic culture that is able to engage, politicians, is able to engage policies, and be able to hold those that we elect or those that are appointed to serve us accountable. Mm-hmm. And I think that is what is missing. I think the opportunity was missed with the county government of Kidero, that of Sonko, and I think for the Nairobi Metropolitan Service, although we are seeing a lot of work in terms of the delivery of projects, there is virtually little that is happening to build a democratic, civic, non-violent culture that is able to hold county government accountable, but at the same time to produce the kind of leadership that will go beyond this moment. And I think one of the biggest dangers, if I was sitting in the Nairobi right now, would be the issue of succession. There is no sense that any of the investment that they are making in terms of road infrastructure or water and sanitation, that these will be safeguarded by a democratic leadership that is accountable, that is not corrupt, and is able to openly and in an accountable way manage the affairs of Nairobi. And I think that is where the bigger question is, or to quote you, that is where the rain started hitting us. Yep. And secondly, it will continue to beat on us.
If I may just sort of like pick up from what you've said, you see, quite aside from what civic education and whatever education, psychological training the police may need, but do we really genuinely equip our police service with everything they need to actually carry out the duties that are demanded of them?
I think it was last month the Principal Secretary for the Ministry of Interior spoke about changing the criteria for the appointment of police officers, and he began to intimate that they will begin to only take graduates. Mm-hmm. So that the level of education would be much higher. And I think this is an important conversation. We would argue that besides education, there really needs to be clarity around the ethical nature of officers. So, for example, at the moment, it gives me the sense that many officers take pride in their levels of firmness, their levels of aggression, their ability to hammer with electricity poles anybody that they think is breaking the law, rather than see themselves as stewards of the public, as guardians of the public. Yep. The British have spent a lot of time developing what they call the Bobby on the beat. The Bobby on the beat essentially is your officer. He is known to you. He has a geographical area that he operates in, and he is expected to really just be there to support the public. Yep. And in many times, people don't fear calling them. At the moment, looking at the national crime statistics, less than 5% of the country actually reports crime to the police. Now, there is no way we can bring down violent crimes or economic crimes if we are not creating a sense of confidence and trust in those officers that are wearing uniforms to serve us.
Yep.
Rungu, when you have cases, and not one or two, but repeated cases of where the police are reported as being complicit in the actual commission of the crimes themselves, you see, this is the power of representation. They don't need to be 10. If even just one case is reported, believe me, it will obfuscate 100 others that represented some very, very positive things. And the reason is because of the expectations due to the service that is expected to be received from this force. Mm-hmm. If people expect that they will receive security and the experience is different, then we can say all we like, but what people are going to go by is what they have experienced, or what they have read, or what others they know have experienced. That's why I asked the question. Let me rephrase it. Are there steps that are being taken to ensure that we equip our police service adequately to meet the tasks that we demand of them?
I mean, I think the best person to answer that question would be the Inspector General of the police, followed by the Cabinet Secretary of Interior. From where we sit as Amnesty International, we know that there are three things that really work in terms of improving the professionalism of the police. The first is that they are kept constantly aware of the fact that being a police officer is not a privilege. It is actually a duty that is bestowed to them under certain laws in this republic, and their behavior is completely conditional on that.
Mm-hmm.
If they break that oath of office that they take, they should be removed immediately or retrained and given an opportunity to serve differently. The second thing is that community policing, building civic police relationships, is what brings down the level of violence.
Mm.
The third is that not everything is a policing issue. Crime is actually a consequence of inequality, gross inequalities, and a sense of hopelessness for those on the poorer spectrum, that they will ever be able to have a life of dignity and comfort. And I think we saw, I've heard many times in places like Mlango, Kubwa, and Madare and others, that when we had a strong public works program under the National Youth Service before the cartels and all that in glitters is not gold destroyed that program, we had a reduction in crime rate. So I think the other thing we have to say is that the police cannot police inequalities. They cannot police poverty. That is the work of other government agencies.
Yeah, true.
And where they fail, the police are actually being put in a position where they have to police their way out of a dysfunctional economy.
True. There's a comment here. Someone says, police violence is not getting worse. It's just getting filmed. And Patricia, I want to come to you and ask you, even from the statistics that Irongo started giving us earlier about violence among women legislators globally, this is an area of concern even for Amnesty International. They've recorded this. Talking about violence on women leaders, very many people look up to you, Patricia. They see that you've been elected by the people of Mlango Kubwa. You have become an MCA. You also play other roles in leadership positions in various other organizations. And then they see this kind of violence. It becomes, they get discouraged of wanting to get into politics. What would you say to the women who look up to you, they're thinking of getting into leadership, and then they see the kind of violence being meted on women leaders?
I'll just say maybe this is one of such scenarios, and they should never give up, One of them will never let you, lose hope or, they should always be courageous, and I look forward and I hope action will be taken, and not because of me, so that it can create, a source of encouragement to any woman who wants to take up any leadership position, and also to serve as an example to anyone or any police force who want to perpetrate what they did to me. Because if we leave that unattended, then we are really discouraging any, not only even women, even men. We all need to be protected.
Indeed.
Because it's just not me. I carry, a big family behind my back.
Yeah. So action really must be taken, and action must be seen to be taken and be taken on the officers that perpetrated this, and also the service itself. The service itself should rise up to the occasion. The government ought to come to you. Like Irongo said, you deserve a public apology for this, for what happened to you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Patricia Mutheu, MCA for Mlango Kubwa Ward. And it's good to hear that you'll expect to be discharged today to go home and recuperate from home and continue serving the people of Mlango Kubwa. Again, our sincere empathy with you for what you've gone through. But we urge you, like you've said, urging the other leaders, keep the fight.
Yeah.
And CT, say goodbye to them and to Irongo as well.
Mheshimiwa Patricia and Irongo, thank you very, very much for your contribution.
Thank
you, CT.
Yes.
And also, Honorable Mutheu, we see you. We empathize with you. Please do not lose hope. And to all your constituents in Mlango Kubwa, an injustice happened 2 days ago. But we have seen it, and we seek justice also alongside you for your member of county assembly.
Thank you so much.
Asante sana and have a good day, ladies and gentlemen.
You too.
Thank you.